evening and welcome to our October 7th session of the IDEA Network, Native Americans Breaking the Silence. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We are very excited about this presentation and the opportunity to work with our presenter. So a few things before we get started. Again, welcome. And as a reminder, side conversations and chats are welcomed and encouraged. This presentation is recorded for future use, and your smiling faces are welcome, but if you don't wish your image to be visible, please turn your camera off. And we would like for you to put in the chat your name, your school district or organization, your email address is optional, and what inspired you to be here today. So if you would like to take a moment to do that. And as you are doing that, I'd like to share just a few ideas from our IDEA Council. Missouri Alliance for Arts Education's IDEA Council's objective is to foster inclusive arts opportunities by examining current practice through an inclusive lens, uncovering paths to eliminate barriers leading toward inclusivity and equity, and gathering and sharing resources in support of personal and professional development in the areas related to racism, inclusion, diversity, and equity. The Missouri Alliance for Arts Education supports, promotes, and advocates for fine arts education for the benefit of all Missourians. So this evening, we would like to welcome Amanda Davison. She is a gifted education teacher in the Hazelwood district. So I am going to stop share and turn it over to Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Please bear with me. I'm getting over bronchitis, and so I've got my chai tea latte to help loosen up my voice, but please bear with me. Okay. Can everybody see my slides? Okay, perfect. Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to this professional learning session. I'm very honored to speak this evening. My name is Amanda Davison, and I am a gifted education specialist in the Hazelwood School District. Let me start by providing you with some brief background about myself. This is my 20th year in education. All 20 of those years have been in Hazelwood. I have taught both first grade and third grade in the general education classroom. Then 6 years ago, I switched gears to the gifted education sector. I teach students in 2nd through 5th grade. Each day, a different grade level is brought to our center from schools throughout the district to receive their gifted services. I truly love what I do and all that is involved in working with gifted children. When I say I have a dream job, I really and truly mean it. Part of my role as a gifted specialist is to write the curriculum that I want to implement with my students. The criteria is that what we want to teach needs to be connected to the Missouri learning standards, and it needs to be 1 to 2 years above grade level when possible. You've heard the saying that teaching is a work of heart. Before I begin talking about the unit I wrote, you should know that I have a passion for ancestry. I have always known that some of my ancestors were Native American. It was a part of my family culture as I was growing up. Today, I speak for those family members who were once silenced and also for my ancestors who were sent to walk down the Trail of Tears. This evening, I aim to break that pattern of silence through the power of education. Over the last several years, I have dug even deeper into where I come from. Through this research, I have discovered even more relatives of Native American descent in my family tree. Over the years, I have asked many questions and researched primary documents about my family. You could say that Native American culture is a passion of mine, but I wanted to know more about Native American culture and history. However, I didn't want to keep this knowledge to myself. I thought it was important to enrich the lives of my students by building a unit around this topic. I think that this serves a twofold purpose. First, it provides students with a history of people who have a very rich culture of traditions as well as experiences. Secondly, it asks students to become even more culturally aware. Another big part of teaching involves listening and incorporating the art of authenticity into the lessons that you share with your students. I have heard others talk about the value of Native American history. They mention their desire for students to have more exposure to this knowledge and not just around Thanksgiving time. This too inspired me. Before I began writing the plan, there were some non-negotiables that I brainstormed in advance. I knew that I did not want this to be a sit and get class. My students need a historical foundation that is somehow meaningful to them. The solution was to have students create an artifact to take home after each lesson. The artifact will correspond with the Native Americans of that lesson's region and the tribe taught that day. I also knew that I wanted to incorporate depth and complexity in most of my lessons. In my opinion, depth and complexity, for those that may not know, is a more expanded version of the DOK, the depth of knowledge. It is a more concrete tool for teachers to reference when planning lessons that dig deeper into the understanding for their students. Last, I wanted to alleviate any misconceptions that students might have. I wanted to make sure that students understood that Native Americans were not just people of our past. They are people of our present and of our future. There are many people in current day tribes that are alive and well. I wanted to break beyond the stereotypes that all Native Americans lived in teepees. Many dwellings were dependent on the environment in which they lived. I also wanted them to know that Native American history is American history. The land that we live on was once Native American ancestral land. Then it was time to put pen to paper. I began by referencing the Missouri Learning Standards to gain a starting point for building this unit. The unit mainly addresses fourth grade social studies standards. This unit is geared towards the second grade. My lessons are built on Native American migration, starting with the Paleo Indians thousands of years ago. We learned that they were hunters and gatherers in Eurasia who lived 40,000 years ago. They crossed the Bering Strait land bridge in order to find more food in the Americas. The following week, we take a closer look at the Paleo Indians. The students learn that since they lived so long ago, it's difficult to know what their lives were like. In fact, a lot of the animals that they hunted are now extinct, but they left us with some evidence in the form of cave drawings. The students learn more about cave drawings. Then I model how to make a cave drawing by using black cardstock, brown craft paper, charcoal, white chalk, hairspray, and a glue stick. The students then recreate a cave drawing of a mudglyph owl. In the next lesson, we learn that Native Americans of the Northwest, specifically the Tlingit people, part of what they learn in the lesson is that the Tlingit people use cedar wood to make totem poles. The totem poles told stories of the history of the tribe and their individual families. At the end of the lesson, students make a totem pole. They are provided with pictures of a fox, a beaver, a bear, and an eagle to color and cut out. They glue each animal in their own desired order on a paper towel roll to recreate the totem pole effect. Then we work our way to the southwestern part of the United States to learn about the Hopi and Navajo people. Part of what the students discover about the Navajo people is that they are known for their beautiful artwork that they create through weaving. Using looms that I make in advance out of cardboard, the students weave a 2-foot long piece of yarn threaded through a plastic needle in and out of 12 yarn loops that I have attached in pre-cut notches of the loom. When the students run out of the first color, they are provided with another piece of yarn of a different color or the same color to continue weaving. We then travel a little further east in some of the preceding lessons to the Great Plains. The students not only learn about what the land is like in the Great Plains, they take a closer look at the Comanche, Pawnee, and Omaha tribes of this area. The students discovered that the Comanche people learned to ride horses at full speed and shoot arrows at the same time. Additionally, the kids find out that the Comanche, Omaha, and Pawnee people survive by eating buffalo, and they follow buffalo migrations in order to survive. While on the hunt, the Omaha and Pawnee people lived in teepees. Otherwise, they lived in earth lodges. During the second half of the lesson, the students color and cut out teepee templates that are provided to them. The teepees are then curved into shape and glued. 3 twigs are given to each student. The students band a rubber band at the top of the bundle. They are then instructed to place the bundle inside the teepee and through the hole at the top. The bottom of the sticks are separated gently inside the teepee and taped to the inside walls. In the following lesson, we take a closer look at the Osage people of the Great Plains. Part of what the students learn during this lesson is that the music is very important to the Osage people. Each year in June, they host a special event called an Ilanska. Drums are very important at this event. In advance, I spray painted recycled cylindrical objects, such as Folgers containers. The students place a square piece of felt over the top of the cylinder, and the lid is then attached to the top of the felt. The students color and decorate their drums using markers, beads, and feathers. We then move to the Northeast to learn about the tribes that settled there. Part of what the students learn in the lesson is that Native Americans living in that area used the Three Sisters planting method. Using model magic clay and paint, the students then create a pinch pot of either a squash, a string bean, or corn as representation. Finally, we move to the Southeast. A part of what the students learn about the people who lived in that region is that their homes were either a chickee that was built 2 to 3 feet above the ground, or a wattle and daub house made of woven river cane, wood, and vines to create a frame and then covered with mud. The students are then given templates to color and cut out, and then assemble a 3D model of a wattle and daub house. As you can see, every other week I teach about Native Americans who settled in different United States regions. That entails introducing the region and showing that location on the map, the tribes that settled there, vocabulary that is specific to the people or tribes, historical background, 1 or 2 depth and complexity questions to check for understanding, and the significance of the chosen artifact for the lesson or tribe or tribes of that region. So in the chat, I have a depth and complexity question for you to answer. So looking at this map, this is a depth and complexity patterns question. In what way is the pattern of early Native American migration different than the migration pattern of westward expansion by the settlers, trappers, and miners in the 1800s? Go ahead, if you will, and type your answer in the chat. And then Ms. Phelps, I cannot see the chat due to my screen share, so if you wouldn't mind just checking the chat, that would be so great.
So I am seeing the migration pattern is moving eastward, west to east, follows weather towards the southeast, looks opposite in directions, west to east for indigenous people, settlers, trappers from east, and in some cases north and south, and they traveled west to east.
Exactly. Very good. Very good. So different than what we know about the migration of westward expansion going from east to west. The migration pattern of the Native Americans was from east to west. Good job. The preceding week, we take a closer look at one specific tribe from the region that we learned about the week before with a similar lesson progression. The second half of the lesson is dedicated to creating an artifact pertaining to that tribe. I felt like a student as I was writing this curriculum because I learned so much. And I think that is okay because as educators, we should never stop learning ourselves. In the midst of curriculum writing, I had the opportunity to attend a powwow with my mom in Jefferson City, Missouri. If you have never had the chance to attend a powwow, I highly recommend it. Some interesting things that I learned while writing my unit were totem poles are specific to the tribes in the Northwest region of what is now the United States and even into British Columbia and Canada. Depending on the region, there were a variety of housing structures that Native Americans lived in. The people of the Northwest and the Native Americans of the Northeast lived in longhouses, while the people of the Southwest, like the Hopi tribes, lived in pueblos. However, the Navajo people of the Southwest lived in hogans. The Native American people in the Great Plains, like the Omaha and the Pawnee tribes, lived in earth lodges. Some teepees were used for housing, while others were merely used as temporary dwellings when people were on a buffalo hunt. And finally, the Native American people of the Southeast lived in either a wattle and daub house or a house known as a chickee. Right, so it's time for another depth and complexity question. This time, this is a language of the discipline depth and complexity question. And in the chat, if you can tell me which words argue against the idea that all Native Americans lived in teepees. Go ahead and type your answer in the chat. And then Ms. Williams-Phelps, if you wouldn't mind monitoring the chat, that would be great.
And so I entered Hogan, Earth Lodge, Chickee.
Fantastic.
And I see Hogan, can't pronounce Pueblo, Waddle and Mudd, Chickee and Moore.
Awesome. Sounds like you guys get the idea. Fantastic.
Good.
All right. Something else I learned as I was writing this unit is that the Osage people are a tribe of the Great Plains, and each June they host a very important ceremonial gathering called the Ilanska. This gathering is meant to celebrate and pass on the Osage culture. It also unites the Osage people from around the reservation and the country. The difference between an Ilanska and a powwow is that a powwow is secular, while an Ilanska is religious, but they both include singing, drumming, and dancing. The people of the Northeast Woodlands created a planting method known as the Three Sisters. They planted corns, bean, and squash together because they found that all three plants work in harmony. The corn is planted in the center and offers support for the pole beans. Beans provide nitrogen to the soil and give even more structure. And finally, the squash leaves offer shade to the soil and also helps to prevent weeds. One last piece of information that I found interesting is that the Iroquois people are now known as the Haudenosaunee. Some people say that the name changes because the name Iroquois was a derogatory name given to the Haudenosaunee people from their enemies. Now I want to empower you. I want to show you how to incorporate Native American concepts into some of the standards that you already teach. The standards that I'm about to go over are specific to kindergarten through 5th grade classroom teachers in the state of Missouri. But if those qualifiers do not apply to you, you will still hopefully be able to get the idea and improvise for the situation that pertains to your classroom. Let's begin by examining the Social Studies Missouri Learning Standard 7D. This standard is written for grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. I'm going to share a lesson idea for kindergarten, however, it can be adapted to specific grade levels. The standard says that students are to share findings about a social studies topic. After learning about different tribes from different regions, you could assign tribes to students or let them choose. You could provide them with material specific to that tribe. You would then model how to create a lap book for their assigned tribe. And if you're not familiar with a lap book, what a lap book is, you just take a file folder and you open it up and you have the students folded in half, into the middle on one side and into the middle on the other side. And then they can glue some sort of title page on either side. And then once they open, each section can be designated for something different, some different component that you want them to include in their lap book. You could then model how to create a lap book for their assigned tribe. Since you have already taught the material and discussed what each item to be included in their lap book represents, the students should be able to explain each component added on their own. Upon completion, the students can then share their information with the class. I know that teachers are pressed for time. There are so many standards to cover before the end of the school year. So why not make these lessons cross-curricular? You can incorporate standard 3A, A, B, C, and D through your guided reading groups. The Blue Jays, for example, the guided reading group Blue Jays could read and learn about the Coast Salish tribes of the Northwest. The Robins could read and learn about the Navajo tribes of the Southwest, and so on. You could also apply the ELA Speaking and Listening Standard 3AC. When presenting the information they learned to the class from their lap books, the students are confirming the information that you taught them during the lessons and retelling that information to the class. As they create their lap books, you could keep a running record of who asked you appropriate questions for clarification, which is also part of the standard. Moving on to 1st grade, standard 7A says that students should be able to justify and use artifacts to share information on social studies topics. You are always welcome to use some of the artifact ideas that I shared with you this evening. An idea would be that after you teach about the tribes of different regions, and I wouldn't recommend more than 1 tribe per region, so 6 tribes total, you have several artifacts available to represent each of those 6 tribes. You pick a student's name in whatever selector method that you have. Once the student's name is called, the student comes up to the front of the class, picks an artifact from the display table, and tells the region and tribe that the artifact is representative of, what the artifact was used for, and why it is important. Again, you could make this cross-curricular as well by incorporating the teaching portion into your reading groups. The reading standard 3A, A through D, is very similar to the standard for kindergarten. This task listed in the standard could be skills that the students acquire in their small group reading time using different books per reading group about various tribes. The learning takes place through the skills in the standard. Then the students can take turns doing the artifact share as a culmination to the learning that took place in their reading groups. In second grade, there is already a standard written to teach about Native Americans. Standard 3A-B asks students to compare and contrast the changing habitats, resources, art, and daily lives of Native American people in regions of the U.S. After you provide background knowledge and instruction, you could show this map to your students. They could use the map to compare and contrast how the land that Native Americans lived on in 1784 has changed since then, once the United States officially became a country. You could share with the students that where Native Americans once lived, as seen in the shaded yellow areas on the map, had resources that Native Americans could use to make the various homes that they lived in those respective areas. However, after being relocated west, those same resources may not have been available. You could even ask a depth and complexity ethics question that asks students to synthesize the information from your lesson. The question could be, what changes could be made to this situation over land in order to make things more fair to the Native Americans living today? You could show pictures of Native American homes and dwellings, resources, and art before 1784 versus now. You could even pull in some more depth and complexity change over time questions to ask your students. When talking about homes, you could have the students analyze what you taught by asking them the question, what prompted the need for this change? As a closure, you could have the students make dioramas individually or in pairs. You could have some pairs make something such as homes then, and some pairs make dioramas of homes now. The students could do a gallery walk to compare and contrast. You could even make these lessons cross-curricular by incorporating the science standard 2ESS2B1. My thought is that you could have the students make a model of the land and bodies of water in the region that they created a diorama of. They can include this model in their diorama. The students should show the features of the land in that area that was needed by the Native Americans to create those homes. Third grade also already has a Missouri Learning Standard written. The standard 3AF asks students to evaluate the impact of westward expansion on the Native Americans in Missouri. Native American tribes in Missouri, specifically the Osage tribe, made trades as travelers were moving along the Missouri River during westward expansion. Their main source of trade was fur. The trading benefited both the Native Americans and the Europeans. This was a large part of the economy for Native Americans and assisted the Europeans in their journey west. One idea to incorporate after you've taught your lesson is to have the students participate in I have, who has, using trading cards that the Native Americans would barter with the Europeans. After the simulation is over, the students can reflect on all of the items that were crossed off from the European trader side of the board. The teacher will point out that those goods now belong to the Native American tribe. You could then ask your students to evaluate by asking them the depth and complexity change over time question. What are the pros and cons of this change or lack of change? Unfortunately, westward expansion was not always a positive experience for the Native Americans. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 caused the Native Americans to be forcefully removed from their lands and relocated by the government to Oklahoma. This opened up available land in the South and Southeast for white settlers. This is otherwise known as the Trail of Tears. The book Trail of Tears by Joseph Bruckick does a good job of telling this story. This information also ties into standard 3AF. However, you could also make this lesson cross-curricular. You could turn the expectations in standards 3C, A through E, into your whole group lesson or guided reading lesson questions based on what the students read or heard in the book Trail of Tears. Standard in grade 4, standard 3C, that asks students to research stories and songs that reflect the cultural history of the United States before 1800. You could have various Native American folklore printed out and available for students to borrow. Or if you have the actual book available, that would be an option too. Maybe you would like to offer digital only. You could have the YouTube read aloud versions available in Google slide format in your Google Classroom. Besides folklore, you could also have a table of instruments that would have been used by the Native Americans. Many of these could have been a drum, a rain stick, or a rattle. To enhance the lesson, you could have some Native American music playing in the background. I like to stream this from YouTube. You could present the students with a choice board in which they are to choose a designated number of spaces to complete. The spots that they choose ask them to read the folklore or evaluate the instrument and then complete some type of follow-up activity. Standard 6C is somewhat cross-curricular. However, as an exit slip after the lesson, you could incorporate writing standard 3A-B. You could ask students to write a question down that they still have about Native American folk tales or music. This question should be one that they would like to answer themselves through their own research. The next few writing lessons could be geared towards the research process, which would lead into accomplishing most of the remainder of the writing standard 3A, C through H. The fifth grade standard 6D asks students to analyze the preservation of cultural life, celebrations, traditions, and commemorations over time. There are many Native American traditions that have been passed down for several generations, such as powwows, dances, drums, smudging, art forms like beadwork, traditional clothing, storytelling, and language preservation. I would like to recommend beginning your lesson with a book titled We Are Still Here, written by Tracy Sorrell. This book is about the struggles that Native Americans have endured over several generations in the United States. Then, after you teach about cultural traditions that have been passed down from generation to generation, you could have the students participate in a stand-up, hand-up, pair-up to talk with different partners as they answer the following depth and complexity questions. What forces do you think are acting on the Native Americans to maintain stasis in their traditions? How could the same factors that we heard about in the story We Are Still Here have resulted in a different effect? Describe the difference between a powwow then and a powwow now, and which details are still true about Native American storytelling then and Native American storytelling now. You could also make these lessons cross-curricular. The fifth grade reading standard 3CE asks the students to integrate information from several texts on the same topic in order to write or speak about the subject knowledgeably. The students could do internet searches on Native American life then versus now based on the social studies standard 6D. Again, that standard wants the students to be familiar with cultural life, celebrations, traditions, commemorations over time. In addition to internet searches, there are some good children's books that you can make available, which also addresses these subtopics. Additionally, you could incorporate the writing standard 2B, A through H. The standard wants the students to be able to write informative or explanatory text that has a topic sentence, is organized into paragraphs, and ends with a conclusion. After collecting research from the internet and through some of the books provided, the students could write about each subtopic, celebrations, traditions, cultural life, and commemorations, into separate paragraphs. The student could take this work through the writing process using a teacher checklist to ensure that they covered items addressed in the standard, such as using facts, details, examples, and quotations. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their evening to listen to this presentation. I think that this work is so important. We need to take time to see and celebrate the beauty in others, and we need to pass that light on to our students. It is so important that they know what an impact Native Americans had on people and on the space surrounding them. This should be a year-round, in-depth topic that is explored and celebrated. My hope is that something that you have seen or heard this evening sparks a passion inside of you. Thank you so much. I am working with Dr. Hartenberger as well, and she is amazing. For those of you who are interested in reaching out to her, she has a display case set up outside of my room right now, and it is absolutely amazing. She's got Latin American and Hispanic heritage artifacts set up so the students can see those in person, and so they're really neat. So she is an amazing resource to contact as well. So. I'm just looking in the chat. While it's important to allow opportunities for creative freedom, sometimes the templates, okay.
I put my website in, but when you go there, it identifies it by ethnomusicology terms, which is membranophone, which is a skin, instruments made out of skin, idiophones, okay? And so those are I use it also for STEAM, because that website teaches the instruments by STEAM. But if you go to the top corner and click, it breaks it down by native tribes in each region with their artifacts. So if you go to the top right-hand corner, it's there, and you can find if there's an Osage, or you can find if there's the Iroquois, or you can find it if it's a Wakakoodle or whatever it is. It sorts the instruments, and when you click on the instrument, it tells you the history of it and the use of it.
And there are audio samples too, right, Aurelia?
No, I don't have any audio examples on it because right now I can't afford the the license for each one of the audience, because it's just mine privately. So it doesn't, but it does give links. But the links don't necessarily take you to the audio of it, but it links to verifications.
Well, Amanda, I've appreciated the opportunity to meet with you prior to this session and get to know you and your work. There's so much depth and richness to the work that you have done and the research that you have done, that there's just not enough time in an hour to begin to scratch the surface. Was just enthralled with all the different layers of learning that you have presented and the work that you are doing with your students. So if you would like to continue putting questions in the chat, I am going to share my screen and bring up some closing information, and then we can wrap up our session. So again, thank you all for being here today for our session presented by Amanda Davison. And if you are in need or want a continuing ed certificate, please send your name and email address to me, cynthia.phelps@moaae.org. And then please take a moment, and I will put this in the chat. Please take a moment to complete our survey for today's session. So I am putting that link in the chat right now. And we appreciate your feedback for our sessions. We are looking to grow our IDEA community. And again, we're always seeking to improve our IDEA events, so they are of the greatest benefit to you. So thank you all for being here today. I am going to, we'll keep the session open. So if you have any other questions, or Amanda, if you have any other thoughts that you would like to share.
Just thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it. Anything that you can do to pull in Native American information and what you're doing would definitely help our students out. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.